Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Sarah Pinborough. Sarah is the award-winning #1 Sunday Times and New York Times bestselling author of the psychological thriller and hit Netflix show Behind Her Eyes, and more than 20 other novels and novellas, including Insomnia and the young adult thriller 13 Minutes. She has also written for the BBC, and she lives in England. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. Well done on the name.
I made your face. I know. We had this conversation, Sarah and I, whether it was Pinborough, which is how I would have in my mind pronounced it, or Pinborough, which is how she says it. And I always try to comply with
Americans when they come over here, it's always like Edinburgh. And
yes.
People go to Edinburgh. It's Edinburgh.
Edinburgh. Oh gosh, Sarah,
Edinburgh, Pinborough. We don't do the borough thing. We do borough.
So okay, well, I probably won't get it right again in the future unless someone reminds me. I'm very proud that I managed to get it right this month.
I like the American sound. I like Pinborough. I think it sounds better.
Pinborough. It sounds, yeah, I know, but it is the thing where like you're supposed. I would, if somebody was going to mispronounce my name, I would, I'd want to have a say in it. Like I had family friends actually growing up who pronounced it Danielle.
Oh,
Danielle. And I was always like, and they were all my parents' age, so I didn't correct them. And to this day, I always was a little bit like, that's not how you say Danielle.
not actually my name.
That's not how anybody says Danielle, really.
No, is it?
So Sarah Pinborough is here to discuss this fabulously dark, eerie, gothic book called We Live Here Now. So, Sarah, before we dig into all the fun stuff, tell our listeners about We Live Here Now.
Okay, We Live Here Now is about a couple called Emily and Freddie, who are, a pretty average sort of mid-30s couple. She broke her leg on holiday, ended up with sepsis, has spent a lot of time in hospital. She was in a coma. It was all very traumatic. And when she comes out of it, Freddie persuades her that they should sell up their life in London and move to a big house in Devon, which is the west coast of England. It's very countryside. It's very farming. It's very out of, the big city life. And it's a house that she had actually been looking at on holiday. So he thought this was some big romantic gesture. So they move into this house. And she starts to think there's something very odd in the house. She's not sure if it's her sepsis syndrome, because that can create some, problems for you. And so she starts to believe the house might be haunted, but she can find no record of any murder or death ever happening there. And it's really, to me, it's a story about long-term relationships, the lies you tell when you start them, let alone when you're in them. And this whole thing of changing as we grow, and how maybe we should just all be nicer to our partners.
Boy, I mean, okay, and we don't do spoilers, but I am going to put it out there into this podcast that the ending of this is so fabulously fun. I mean, everybody has to pick this up. So I
want people to smile. There's creepy bits in the book, but it is a thriller. It is a psych thriller. But when we get to the end, a bit like with Behind Her Eyes, I wanted people to laugh at the end of that.
There's a little chuckle for sure.
Yeah, you kind of like, oh,
a little satisfied smirk that happens at the end. Well, and I confess to not having read Behind Her Eyes yet, although I've heard so many wonderful things about it. And as you said, I could just watch it, to which I replied, no, I have to read it. But I want to hear about the experience with Netflix. But I want to start with, because I haven't read any of your other stuff, which obviously Behind Her Eyes was hardly your first novel. You have it sounds like an incredible backlist of fabulously successful.
It's my first hugely successful one.
Well, that's so then everyone's like, your first book, and you're like,
yeah,
okay. But at any rate, well, congratulations. I'm sure well earned and fabulous. But I want to talk about the Ravens, because the book opens in the point of view of a bird, which I thought was so, well, of course, it's so Edgar Allan Poe and it's so gothic and eerie, but we really do follow this raven male through his, loved one. And and then, subsequent things that happened. But I kind of was curious, like, is that something you've done before? How did that come to you? It was so kind of, it
The
really,
Raven
oh,
was actually, he was not in the first draft. He wasn't in the second draft because it started much more psych thriller. But I was leaning to, like, all my books, like Behind Her Eyes, Insomnia, they have this weirdness in them. And this one has weirdness in it, you know?
yeah.
And I'm quite bored of writing straight psych thrillers. So I was leaning back to my kind of horror roots, a little bit creepy. And then it had started with the prologue of them on holiday, like the moment of the accident.
Ah,
And then I thought, actually, this is a gothic novel. What can I use? And I was thinking about Poe. And then there was a part of the concept of the story and the part of the secrets of the house that I was struggling to find a way without it being too explanatory. And I suddenly thought, actually, I could maybe use this raven as a narrative structure. I mean, I actually voiced the raven in the audiobook.
oh, you, oh my God,
I voiced the raven.
I thought that was so, I mean, I just thought it was so clever. And you're right, in terms
I
of,
really like him. He's my favorite character,
I
the
know
raven.
he's my favorite character too, because he's actually so earnest, right? He's so
Yeah,
concerned about leaving his, deceased partner behind, and that he left her in the house. And he's got certainly more like honest guilt than anybody else in the
he's
book.
got more emotional depth than Freddie has.
And Joe for that matter, right?
No, to be fair, yeah.
That is so okay.
Uh,
So I want to dig in a little. So we talked about this a little bit ahead of time too. Is that I love the sort of the female characters, and I don't know how much of I don't know how much of the sort of what the house does that we sort of you're comfortable talking about, because I don't. I'm fair to not, I'm happy to not talk about it at all. But it does do this kind of crazy thing.
I think it definitely brings the worst out in couples.
Yes.
Like I think without giving stuff away about the house in and of itself and the big secret of the house, it does things like, I mean, my great thing is if we could all hear what each other really thought, there would be no marriages. There'd be a lot of murders, there'd be no marriages, because, like we're cruel in our heads and we think awful things even when we love someone. But I do think the house, so there's a point, and this isn't giving anything away, where Emily is saying something about her husband, Freddie. And, she says, oh, he drives me mad when he does some such and such. And Freddie, a door creaks open just so Freddie can hear this. But he doesn't hear the whole context of the conversation. So, of course, that makes him angry. And rather than just saying, in a healthy relationship, you might say, oh, I overheard such and such, that really hurt my feelings. He lets it simmer. And the same for her. And so the house, a bit like in there was a movie, I think it was The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves, and he becomes basically a lawyer for the devil.
Yes.
And he blames the devil for the choices he makes. And they're like, no, they're your choices. It's how you react to a situation is down to you.
Right.
So it's kind of like it encourages the worst in them to a certain extent, but the worst has to be in you.
And the house is all those little tricky things, like opening a window, turning up the heat, like
Mm.
are kind of like the most mundane, aggravating parts of any relationship, right?
Well,
Some
and those are what I wanted to play with because I thought you can have lots of, but if one person's always hot and one person's always cold, that's an argument ground right
it's
there.
just it's like this, it's like a stereotype, but it's actually it's a stereotype because it fits so perfectly with how exactly
Yeah.
we all feel. And it's like, familiarity breeds contempt. That is the unfortunate part of a long marriage or a long relationship. And it's true in in all the
And
relationships.
I put a bit of me in there. I think it's still in there. I think it was in the final. But I have a terrible habit of not putting the lids on jars properly. So I just half put the lid on and bung it in the fridge. And then someone will come and take it out and the jam smashes or the honey smashes. And it's the kind of thing that an ex-boyfriend would be like, oh, that's so sweet. You've got to learn to do it up. And by 6 months in, he's like, do the lid up.
Right.
It's like, ah.
How
And the same with like men not helping you change the bedding, and you're like, I'll put the bins out. You do the bedding just for once. And all these little things that we never discuss, we just let them simmer.
build and
You
build.
know.
So let's start. I mean, so it's an interesting choice. I love the fact that, I mean, it serves the purpose of the story so much that Emily is literally, handicapped, right? I mean,
Mm.
they did the second floor of the home because the master bedroom's on the third floor, but that's much too far for her to go in her sort of, post, accident state.
Yeah.
And then also the idea that something might be wrong with her brain because of the sepsis. And then there's this sort of gaslighting that happens, by Freddie, who, she is stuck in this house. Freddie gets to go back to London. He travels back for work, and she is really, really stuck there. And I love, there's so much metaphor, right? For sort of, her position, and for women, and of course, I'm, sometimes I feel like other people infuse your work with things in that you didn't even really intend. So I'm gonna go in with all the
And
females.
also, she's the one that she's lost her job
Yeah,
because they kept it open for so long, and then she's got this payout, and he's resentful of the fact that she doesn't have to work, even though he always wanted a more trad wife.
right.
He kind of wanted the trad wife, and this is my thing about. I always think every relationship, even the good ones, with the best one in the world, they start with lies because you want to impress the person. So you find yourself adjusting to be something they like, and they adjust to be something you like.
I'm flexible about that. Yeah.
And then, it's like I pretended to like classical music once. 3 years that relationship lasted. I thought I might grow to love it. I did not. I did not grow to love it.
Uh, that's right. So, when you started the idea for the story, did you, is there a conscious thought about sort of what puts Emily in the most uncomfortable position when they get stuck in this house? Like, how did,
Well, there was a few things that fed into it. And as with all things, we use bits of ourselves. And I did, when I was very briefly married, move to Devon with my husband to a big farmhouse. And I was writing my first book at the time. And then I ended up doing teacher training, which got me out of the house, which was great. But he was off out all day. I'm in this big farmhouse where I've got to drive 4 miles to get a pint of milk. And you are very in your own thoughts all the time. And then this past sort of 3 or 4 years, I just had like an accumulation of injuries where I broke my spine, and then a dog took me. I just was recovering from that, and then a dog leapt on me in the park, and I tore all the muscles around my pelvis, and I think I cracked my pelvis. Being the NHS, there's the one bit they didn't actually X-ray, but it took 2 years. It's taken 2 years. Like, so stairs, I couldn't even go up to my own bedroom to start with, and it's taken. So I used a lot of that because that also makes you second guess yourself all the time because you're worrying about everything. You're like, if you get invited to a party, are they going to be, is it going to be too crowded? Are they going to, what if I get knocked over? What if this? What if that? You constantly, and so then you start looking for danger. So I kind of thought, I'm going to take that and I'm going to make it 5 times as bad for Emily. I'm going to have given her sepsis. So now she doesn't trust her own mind as well. And nobody trusts her mind. So it's very much that hysterical woman thing.
right? Well,
Because Freddie's not having these experiences. So he's like, what? What is this? And he's too rational that when he does have the experiences, he'd rather like, oh, the window is open. And she's like, I didn't open it. He'd rather disbelieve her and the nail, like, did you pull the nail out? Didn't you pull the nail out? These things that, we would rather distrust our partner than accept that there might be something odd going on.
I kind of wonder if that's all, like when you speak to that, it makes me think, like, is that a more is that a more masculine trait to sort of think, oh well, she's and is that sort of society planting the seed that women are oftentimes a little bit, they're not quite paying attention, they're not quite as sharp, they're a little bit more delusional, and therefore they're probably, that's it probably was her, even though he wants to trust her, or at least you set out to trust your spouse. But then sort of society has taught us, oh, women are hysterical or crazy or
Oh, yeah, I mean, I remember this at the start of the pandemic. All my female friends were right on it with the right. We got masks, we got this, we got that. We're not going to the store, we're not doing this. The husbands were still like, oh, well, I just went in the supermarket with that. And I just, before the lockdown had properly started,
right.
the women were starting to get a bit like, okay, we need to be a bit more careful, because this is clearly a bigger thing. And the men, it was like they didn't even want to think about it. It was like, if we don't think about it, it'll go away. Whereas I think women, I think maybe inherently because yet they generations and centuries of being the ones who raise the kids, who literally have to tear their bodies apart to give birth to it. We're very aware of risk.
Right.
Like we're the more physically weak we are physically weaker than men. So we have to calculate everything mentally.
Right.
We can't rely on physically doing it. So we have to trust our gut. If you're in a situation you feel it's uncomfortable, you're out
Yes.
because you can't necessarily fight your way out of that situation.
Right.
Men are very dismissive of those things.
Sorry, you say that again?
No, I was just going to say men are quite dismissive of that because they've never had to experience it.
I think that's true. I also think there's this like it sort of again goes back to sort of the centuries of birthing and mothering. There's a duty. There's a sort of innate duty in women. Like this is what we're supposed to do. Versus like I think men, there's more like this is sort of what I this is what I want to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and do what I want to do, which I think is encouraged. I think, and even I raised a girl and a boy, and I consider myself like such a like I'm gonna do this. They'll be the same. I'm gonna do it exactly the same way for both kids. And some of it I will blame because my daughter was firstborn, and you do have a higher expectation of your firstborn. I don't know. I feel like you mess it up. I thought, oh, I'm gonna nail this. I'm the best, Anyway, I still managed to sort of like infuse these gender roles. I mean, I think my children are amazing.
We are so good. It's like we are so conditioned, generationally conditioned. I mean, I always think this with women, and I used to say this on my Behind Her Eyes talk, that women, from the minute we're born, my dog's snoring, the minute we're born, from the minute we start to grow up, we are basically intrinsically told that we are not good enough as we are because we watch women put makeup on, put high heels on, dye their hair, put sexy underwear on, do all these things to be someone else, to be attractive,
Yeah.
And whereas men, it's like, well, I shaved, like, woohoo,
My face.
I think we are, there's so much going on with women. And I think and this is another thing that I find interesting in marriages is like I know so many men who say my wife's gone off sex, and I was like, or she's gone off sex with you.
They don't want
You
to,
know,
Sarah. They
there's a different thing there. And sometimes we need to be made to feel sexy again.
yeah,
Because once you get to know us, it's really hard to regain that fake person.
yeah.
You know?
Right.
So, so I found all this couple stuff, especially when people are hitting their 30s and mid 30s and maybe their lives haven't panned out the way they think they're going to. And like for Freddie and Emily, they've got their two best friends as well, haven't they? Their two best friend couples come and visit them.
Yes.
And there's a thing of like your friends that you've had forever that you think, are they even my friends? Or do we just know each other that long that we're still friends?
And there's a
You
lot
know,
of interesting drama around around those couples as well. And I want to talk about Sally and Joe because
Sally and Joe.
I mean, there's in this town, they don't, Freddie and Emily don't really have people. She gets to know the vicar, um, uh,
Vicar, vicar.
vicar, vicar, the
I
vicar.
guess the pastor, the vicar, we call him a vicar, yeah.
Yeah, the vicar of the local church, and they have this one sort of couple they kind of get to know who, and he's sort of this very sort of silver fox, sexy artist who does these incredible nudes of younger women. He's got a little harem, and Sally seems like quite a strong female character, but she definitely, I mean, Emily is so both curious and also sort of I mean,
She's quite fascinated by them. And I think she, and like most of us, I think, if we were married to someone who painted young women kissing each other and stuff, and then kind of was like, oh, well, I'm just going to have sex with one of them, it's fine, would not be so, like, oh, he's an artist, he's free, he loves me. And he does, he does love Sally. They have a good marriage.
mm,
But, uh,
can you have
Emily,
do they have a good marriage? Like that's a question I
yeah, it's as with all marriages, there are some lies there. Like there are some big lies there.
ask a big one.
The same with Freddie and Emily. So, there are some big lies being told in this little village. Um, but on the surface,
Yeah,
Sally seems really cool with it all. And I think it makes Emily feel even older and staider and
right. Well, and
and
they do
grumpy.
yeah, they do sort of, basically call her a prude for the fact
Yeah.
that not just like all in to be potentially Joe's next subject, right? I mean, Joe wants to paint her and she's like, and we obviously know Freddie probably would not be super cool with that. And It's sort of funny because here's this reversal, right? They've come from London, which is, they're to this place that should be sort of much more conservative and
Yeah.
real, and yet there's this kind of wild energy amongst this couple. So it's all very much of a curiosity, and as you said, I think, but that's like it really feeds Emily in the way that once you sort of your body is broken, right? She probably yearns to feel like she's whole and sexy because
Mm.
barely making it up the stairs. So all these choices in the story and the narrative really sort of feed that same sort of her kind of crazy, her growing sense of, totally insane.
And then she started, yeah, and it's that. I mean, my thing is always like when I started out writing proper horror, straight horror novels. It always used to bother me if I read a horror novel and someone would see a ghost and suddenly everyone believes there was a ghost and everyone, do you see it on some TV shows? It's like everyone buys into the supernatural really quickly. And I was like, if I saw a ghost and I kept seeing a ghost, I would think I had a brain tumor. I would think I was going psychotic. I would be down that private health center as fast as I could carry myself and be like, check it all out because something weird is going
Something
on.
going on. Yeah.
I would, like my friends would be thinking I was weird. I would then internalize it all until something really big happened. I think, oh my God, I've got to show someone this. And like Emily tries to show Freddie stuff and then it's gone. And then she's like, is it me? Is it me? Is it the
Of course.
breeze? And he's saying there's a breeze. And she's like, I'm not sure that's a breeze. And then it really is boiling down to how much you trust your partner, isn't it? And, because actually, if your partner's not believing you, it's a very isolating place to be. And Emily ends up going on this sort of investigative journey where she kind of unpicks a huge amount of things that are going on, in the house and
Yeah.
and the Raven and the village and,
Yeah.
yeah,
Lots of
yeah.
places. Exactly. Well, and then they start to make really bad decisions, which is so lovely because it makes really like Emily does some things you're like, what are you, that's a really bold
She
choice.
does, especially one thing. She makes a very bold move, and it's not the most pleasant move, you
No.
know. But I like to think that the house is a little bit doing that as well. I think there's a little bit of like she's been out in the cold, she's discovered stuff, that has pissed her off, to use a different, sorry to bad language, but she's really angry about some things. And she finds a way to have a get out of jail free card, really, and she goes for it.
Yes.
And and yeah, I mean, it is. I know some people find it hard when you write problematic people, but I think nearly all people are problematic, and I think most people will do bad things at a push and justify it to themselves.
Right.
Like we
Especially
cancel on friends, we justify it to ourselves. We do, like we don't help a neighbor, we justify it to ourselves. We're very good and she finds ways to justify this to herself.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so they are neither of them are over nice people, but they're also not over terrible people,
No.
and that I think is
And they're
is
not likable. I mean, I don't, of course I like Emily more than Freddie, and I don't know if that's
like Emily more than Freddie too, but I kind of like to explore the women more than the men anyway. So,
yeah.
you
And
know,
in the same way that I am more interested in Sally than I'm in Joe. But I think that's the point, right? We're supposed to sort of understand why these women sort of allow themselves to be in these situations. And with Emily, she's in a situation with Freddie, and Freddie seems very benign. I mean, the relationship seems like it was set up, well, and then we sort of, as you said, we unlayer all these things about it. They're like, oh, that's not perfect, and the house is part of it helps peel the layers back in some
yeah.
ways, and in some ways, it's I think in some ways, weirdly, the house is helpful, right? I mean, it's I wouldn't want
Pitching
to
it.
live there.
I wouldn't want to move in there.
I don't need a house. But I do think in some ways it sheds light on things that probably needed to have shed light on them.
And I think this is what I meant about the devil's advocate. Like, and there are ways on if they had chosen to discuss things in different or discuss things rather than just hide them inside themselves. If they it is about I really do want people to come away and think, oh my God, I need to be nicer to my partner. I need to be more forgiving, or I need to let's talk about things rather than let them fester, because I think it's so easy to let those resentments build and build and build
It's a
you know.
very clear message at the end of the book. Let's talk. Let's have some conversation. And I mean, I think that's another thing. We go into a relationship, and at the beginning, as you said, it's so, you almost feel like you don't need to. Everything is so sublime. We don't even need to have a conversation about this tough stuff. And sort of by the time it really comes up, you're kind of pretty far down the rabbit hole of the relationship. So it's such a fun way to, I mean, it's a fun way to explore all these things that happen in every relationship, I think. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
well,
While she's also worried she's going to die in the house.
it's a fair concern at moments. Yes, it's a fair concern at moments. The other thing I wanted to just go back to for a second is the idea of these sort of like, whether characters should be like more likable. And there are characters I feel like that are sort of, you really do open the book and think this is an unlikable character. But I don't think any of the characters in this book are that way. I think they're all, it's not that they're sort of innately unlikable. It's that they are, it's that they're, as you said, they're pushed in a corner. And I think that's what's so fun about our genre, right? Is that we are not, these aren't love stories. We are sticking somebody in a corner and starting to sort of jab at them with something sharp. And of course they're going to react in ways that are that are not always pleasant, not
And surprising to them as well. Like it is surprising to her how she reacts to some of these stuff. And the same for Freddie. He's reacting to situations that he wasn't ready for. And it's
And I
yeah.
think you ask some people like, what do you think you would ever be, able to kill somebody? And people will be saying no. And I say, oh, I think you would. I think
Yeah.
in the right circumstances, and I don't even mean for self-defense, which of course would be the obvious circumstance, but I think you threaten a family member. There are times when I think we would all be driven to murder. And
And white rage. You see some things where it's just, I mean, like never argue with someone in a kitchen would be my advice because, I mean, I knew a woman and she got stabbed to death by her partner in the kitchen and then he hung himself. So the kids went off to school
oh,
and then they had an argument in the kitchen. She got stabbed to death. He hung himself after he killed her. I mean, what a pointless waste of life. If you'd had the argument in a park, maybe better. But you were around, like that rage can get people and
yeah,
do terrible things in a moment of heat. You hear people that they just run someone down because they're that angry.
yeah.
And
Well,
there's
that
something
road was
going on.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, but to say we're not all capable of it. It's like when people would talk about, when we were at school and we would do the Holocaust, and everyone was very clear that they would never be like the Germans and they would never. I was like, well, all the Germans were like everybody else until this thing happened. The minute we start thinking we could never do those things, we're in trouble.
Sure,
We've got to be aware that we're all.
I feel like yeah, I feel all too aware of how the Germans were susceptible to Hitler.
It's very easy to turn a blind eye, isn't it? Like people do it because you don't want to think about the true horror of something. It's easier to just be like, oh, I'm not even seeing that.
Right, that's one
And
person.
also you get shot if you say anything. So, like the bravery elements that, it's a lot easier to hope someone else fights the battle for you than it is to fight the battle.
The
So
instinct of survival is strong. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. Well, I mean, I wanted to. I've gone around and around this question, but I wanted to. So I was sort of asking about how you write. Are you somebody who sort of has the whole story sort of fleshed out? I know you said The Raven, for instance, wasn't in the first couple drafts,
mm.
so you obviously do a fair amount of revision.
Well, I don't normally, but this book was a tricky one because I was quite injured and I was writing a whole TV show because I wrote Insomnia for Paramount. So while I was writing this book, I was writing and making and producing a TV show.
While your back
So
was your spine, is
this
it?
is when my pelvis was done. My back was healing, but my pelvis was done. Yeah. So I was
How did
writing the TV show.
you writing it?
Pardon?
How did physically? How did you do that? You lying down?
No, I've got the sofa angles, so it's like took the pressure off, like I could adjust the angle of it. But so normally I'm quite clean on my drafts. I always have to have the ending locked in place.
Yeah.
So the final chapter of Behind Her Eyes was in the book pitch. I have to see the entire ending. And once that's locked in, then I kind of temp peg a little bit And then I plan I plan 10,000 words at a time in detail, rough write them in Scrivener, copy them over to Word, neat them. So
Sure.
by the time I do one draft, that's probably like 3 drafts of someone who's a pantser, you
Yeah.
know? But this one was trickier because I was injured and I was doing the TV show. So it was not getting the attention it should have got, you know? So that came back to bite me. So I had to try.
I would end result. I mean, it did. It speaks for itself. So,
And
congratulations.
the joy of having the UK deal and the American deal is you get 2 lots of notes. So you're getting 2 lots of great editors' notes. So it's quite good to,
It's better and better and better. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I love it. Are they coming out in sync? Or do I need to?
No, UK is 4th of June.
Okay, but more like a
So,
lot of people have them like 6 months apart. So,
no, it's pretty close. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Good.
last question because and then I know we all, you have to get back to your work, but I want to hear about like writing for television. Obviously, when Behind Our Eyes happened, that was so exciting and congrats.
Yeah.
Did you
Thank you.
work on that or did this
No, I didn't want to
interesting?
because I didn't have the TV experience at the time. Not enough. I wanted it to get made, like so. And that book has dreams. It has all kinds of manner of weird shit goes down in that book. And translating it to screen, I was like, meh, and I had just spent the time writing it. I'd been on tour with it. I was a bit like, I do not want to spend the next
Oh,
year
yeah,
rewriting it. And I mean that was quite a smooth process. I sold it I came out to America and I met loads of people who were wanting it. Then I came back to England and I met with a company called Left Bank, who are a UK company. They make The Crown and they've done some big shows. And I did not want to sell it to TV at that point because we were still at the time of Gone Girl and Girl on a Train, which were films. And Netflix was getting there, but it wasn't the machine it
right,
is now. And TV was not, there was Breaking Bad and stuff, but there wasn't like TV was where it was at. People still wanted their books made to films, even that kind of 8 years ago.
right.
But when I did the meeting with them, they were so on it. I came out and I was like, yeah, I'm selling it to them. And literally from the day I sold, it was 3 years from the day I sold it till it came out, which is the fastest
Yeah,
process.
unbelievable.
When they pitched it to BBC, BBC wanted the ending change, which is like the whole point of the book. The ending is like insane. So then someone at Netflix read it, Netflix America, and really wanted it. And they said, oh, the rights have gone. But when they realized Left Bank had them, they make The Crown together. So they were like, oh, maybe we can make this together. And as soon as they got Steve Lightfoot on to write, it was greenlit before they had a script.
Ah,
So it was so speedy. It was so good. And then Left Bank, when I went, I was in conversation with them, but I'm a great believer in if you're not adapting it, it's nothing to do with you.
yeah,
Like I wouldn't give notes. I wouldn't, I didn't want to see the scripts. I went to the read through because that was fun.
yeah,
And then while I was at the read through, they were like, we should come up with something else and you should write it. Because I was writing, I'd written some pilots and stuff and things by then. And we went away. It was quite cool. We went away to a hotel. There was me, there was 2 other women, Jess Burdett, who is now at Netflix, who was in her 30s. I was in my 40s, and Suzanne Mackey, who's now runs her own company, she was in her 50s. And we just ended up talking about female experience. And I said, well, I've got this half an idea for a book. But maybe we can play with this. So it was basically the story for Insomnia. And they were like, oh my God, we need to make this as TV. So I was doing the pilot and we would go, and I said, well, I want to do it as a book as well because I don't,
yeah.
and I had this crazy idea that I could do the two side by side and you just can't. So we were going round and round with the pilot and I said, let me just write write the book first and then we can come back to it because we'll have the whole story,
Yeah.
because my deadline is creeping up on me and let's get the story down. So I did the book and then we redid the pilot and we gave it to Paramount and they greenlit it. So then we were like, yeah, so then it was 6 episodes.
And did you teach yourself to do screenwriting as a part of or before the books or as you did the
I
books?
don't know. I mean, my first book came out in 2004, so a long time ago. And I started doodling with films, and then I adapted my first book, The Hidden. And there's a great horror movie director, he's quite old now, called Peter Medak. He did The Changeling, and he did The Ruling Class, he did The Craze, did a lot of Hannibal. And he came on board to direct it, and he was great. We worked on the script quite a lot, but we never got it made. But it was a massive learning curve for me. And then we had a big show over here called New Tricks, which is a big crime drama on the BBC. And one of the cast was a real fan of my book, so I wrote an episode of that, which was a real learning curve. That was a real baptism of fire. And then I just kind of just started doing more and more. I really enjoy it. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. So I'm now waiting to hear back on a couple of shows I've got out there. We're waiting to see if we've got green lights. There's a
So
different production company.
different, right? I mean, it's such a different beast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, books, like at the moment, I'm in love with books because
Yeah.
it's so nice after, like it's your thing, isn't it? Like you sit there, it's your world. And then when you finish it, you hand it in and some nice people make some nice comments and suggest a few things. And TV is just like, insane and everyone's shouting at everybody and there's so much money involved and everyone's got a say and everything, and then you constantly changing it, right up to like the last minute when you're going into production and you're like, doing notes on 6, tweaks on 1, and then someone will be like, we can't shoot this, we need to cut 4 pages, we haven't got the space, we haven't got the time, we haven't got the budget. So then literally with 2 days you're
Oh,
cutting scenes and trying to think, will this hold, and then the actors get involved and they like try and change stuff and you're like, no, you can change any line but not that one, that's a clue. Like don't change that line. So it's kind of, but it's such an
yeah.
experience.
I can see how that'd be so energizing and also exhausting. So then you're like,
Yes.
I'm gonna go back to my cave and write another book.
And we are such control freaks, authors. You forget how much of a control freak you are. And then suddenly it's like, and the cast was saying, Sarah's so good, she's so relaxed. And Juice was like, she's not as relaxed as she makes out. I'd be like necking wine at home,
Yeah, right, right. You're like, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, no, good. But then it's such a magical thing, it's such a, when I went to, because I didn't go to set much because I was still recovering, and
yeah.
we were filming at night in this big house, and I went, and it was insane, and I was just looking and thinking, all of this came out of my head, and now these people are making it real. It was so weird and like such a weird feeling.
So
But
excited.
yeah.
What a fun experience. I love that. I mean, obviously all of us dream, right, about the adaptation and and to see it on.
Paycheck. The adaptation paycheck is what we dream about.
Right, exactly. And mostly that, exactly. Are you coming to the US for the
I'm
new
coming. I leave on Sunday. Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic? So tell listeners where they can find out where you're going to be, so people might come and see you.
On my Instagram, Sarah Pinborough Books, there is a post. I'll probably repost it, which is like a little poster of we're only doing 6 stops, but we're doing Boston, Long Island, Phoenix, Houston,
Oh, fine. So you're going to the big ones. You're going to
Lewis.
and you're going to a Murder by the Book down in
Yes.
Boston
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. All the ones we know. Yeah, 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 yeah.
will you be in conversation with Ashley, or were you going to talk to
Well, what I'm doing is because I spent a month in America in February, and one of those was like 5 dinners in 5 days with booksellers in 5 different cities, which was exhausting. But it
yeah.
was fun, but it was exhausting. And the traveling is really boring on your own. And when I did the Behind Her Eyes tour, it was like, oh, this would be great. And it was 2.5 weeks of me on my own
Oh
eating
yeah, no,
hotel
you got
food.
to be
It
in
was
conversation.
horrible.
Yeah.
So I'm taking my best mate with me.
Oh,
So
how
she's coming with me, and she's a lawyer. And I said to her, well, how about we do the in conversations? Because like you're not afraid to do talking. You know me. We'll come up with the questions on the plane. We'll figure it all out. It'll be fun,
love it.
you know.
That's
But
a
I had like an ex-student. Well, I was a teacher for a while, and one of my students lives in Atlanta,
oh,
and he's flying to Long Island. He's flying to the Long Island.
that's so fun.
And
Oh,
he's now like older than I was when I taught him with 2 kids. And it's just like, oh, I'll be so emotional.
oh, that I love it. Well, this is so exciting. And for those of you who are listening to us and not can't see this fabulous, you got to go look at the cover because I love it. And there are those ravens there. Sarah, it was so fun to get a chance to talk about your book.
So nice to chat. And I'm going to go and order all your books
Oh,
now from
well,
Amazon.
that's very generous of you. Thank you so much. But everyone, what a thrill. Today we had Sarah Pinborough
Well done.
pausing for right to just I did it twice. Woo! That's as good as it's gonna get. And this was Killer Women, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.